My question for you today is, do you often find yourself focusing on what you have not yet achieved with your goals? Maybe you set out for a health goal this year, some sort of educational goal, work goal, and oftentimes us high achievers will focus on what we have not achieved, right? I think that's just the nature of the beast, unfortunately, for a lot of us. But I'm here to tell you there is a better way. Let's take a step back. For those of you that are new here, my name is Diane Flores. I've been in the health and fitness space for over 17 years. I'm an IFBB bodybuilding pro, which also makes me a professional dieter. And I'm a personal trainer, I'm a health coach, and I have been tracking macros and calories for a very long time. I've been 200 pounds. I have professionally dieted my whole professional bodybuilding life. I've gained weight, I've lost weight, I've been shredded, I have been obsessive, I've hated my body, I now love my body. I've had unhealthy eating behaviors and everything in between. Now, I'm sure you've heard of enjoy the journey. And I used to just want to punch people when they said that to me. Like, what does that even mean? I don't know what that means. Like, I'm trying to get on stage and I'm eating tilapia and asparagus, and how does one enjoy that, right? Like back in my bikini days. And it used to make me super crazy. I didn't understand that concept. It was very foreign to me. And so that is what we're going to dive in today, because you would be surprised at the mindset shift that I've made that has really brought me to focusing on the present time and really enjoying that journey, which is so important and so key. And I want that for you guys, especially in your health and fitness goals. If you're a competitor, if you are a normie, a lifestyle client, my boss bitch besties, all of you together, let's say it together. We have to enjoy the journey. We have one very short life, and it is a crime if we are not celebrating our victories along the way. I'm here to share with you the things that I did that were not serving my journey, and the shifts that I've made, and also the things that help our clients online and in studio. So let's dive in. I'm really excited about this topic today because I have been enjoying the journey a lot more than I have in my entire life lately. And I want to share that goodness with you. We're going to talk about some tactical and very actionable things that I want you to do after you listen to this, right? I know you're like, I'm just listening to you for, some fitness advice. I don't want to do homework. But like I always say, and this is not my slogan, but I did steal it, information without implementation is useless. So if you listen to this, I hope you glean something from it and actually take steps forward to make some improvements in creating your own sense of motivation and enjoyment. So we are going to dive into my realization and how that came about, and how I realized I was just being a complete asshole to myself because I was not enjoying the journey. And it all came down to one simple tool, which I will share with you. But I'm hoping that today, by planting this little tiny baby seed, right? It's like you plant the seed for the apple tree, but you don't, celebrate the fruit, or the fruit that is bared from the tree. I don't know. I just fucked up that saying, but it's a process, right? It is a process in your self-development and your journey. And I'm hoping that by planting this little apple seed, that it helps shift your mindset and you actually take some action. Promise me you'll do that. Promise me. And also, spoiler alert. You do not have to be miserable to become motivated. And I think that that's a myth. A lot of times people think, the only way I'm going to motivate myself is I'm just like absolutely miserable and I'm just going to, listen to some YouTube video and that's, David Goggins, and I'm just going to get off the couch and I'm just all of a sudden going to be fit. If that were the case, everybody would be doing it. But my hope is that this little seed starts a ripple effect, and maybe you're oh so gracious to share this podcast with a friend who maybe often struggles with motivation as well, or is possibly your workout buddy, and you guys can kind of noodle on this stuff together, right? These are like grown-up conversations that are super sexy. And I think if we can start bringing them to the table more, we will see a revolution in fitness. And, mine is like particularly for my ladies, my boss bitch besties. All right. So this episode today is for you. If you are on a body changing journey, which I know a lot of you are, if you tend to focus on what you haven't achieved, which we talked about already, if you know that you constantly quit and restart programs over and over again, right? I know there are a lot of you out there. I was that person. And this is also for you if you have other goals that are not fitness related. So we're going to go ahead and dive in. But first, I want to do a listener shout out because I love my besties. I'm going to give you some heart hands. I know Zoom has like heart hands these days, but it's not giving it to me. This was a review from, and if this is you, please come say hi over on the gram because I want to thank you for your review, which the username is NMK98, to which says, my favorite new podcast. So much information. Love the fitness and health insight. Just found the After Dark episodes. Obsessed. Well, you know what? NMK98, I'm obsessed with you for leaving me a 5-star review because that means that other boss bitches are going to find me because it'll come up in the podcast recommendations. So I would love and be ever so gracious if you would do that. Thank you so much. Okay, let's go on. I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story time, because I think it's important for you to realize that while somebody who has achieved their IFBB pro status may seem like they have their shit together, their proverbial shit together, that doesn't mean that was always the case, right? Like you see the end goal, but what you didn't see was like the journey. And let me tell you that most of that journey for well over what feels like 15 years at this point was head down and just constantly striving for the next goal without appreciating, oftentimes, the journey behind me. So many of you know, clearly I'm an IFBB pro, and I've been at this health and fitness thing for quite some time. I've done almost 20 bodybuilding shows, and bodybuilding shows are not easy. The road to stage is filled with not feeling good enough. Now, that is my personal experience. And if that was not an experience for you, I am so happy for you. But I will say for myself, this was something I was constantly plagued with. This is something I hear from a lot of competitors as well. But during my journey, it was constantly, I'm still not ready. I would pinch at my stomach and be like, nope. Even though, I've lost a significant amount of weight, I still have 4 weeks. I'm not lean enough. It's not good enough. I'm not, my muscles aren't big enough. I'm not shredded enough. My posing isn't good enough. It's constantly striving for perfection. And a lot of this was challenging because it was up against my own body. And I just got the chills. And when you live in this constant state of which is constant prep, right? And getting lean enough for a show, you are always reminded every time you look in the mirror, every time you do a check-in photo, every time you step on the scale, that you are not ready, right? And I will say the one time this was never an issue in my bodybuilding history was the very first time I competed, because I knew no better, right? I didn't know what the hell I was getting into. I had went to a show. I mean, I think I'd been to 2 shows, but I was just like, oh, this is super cool. Like, these girls are in great shape and they're up there and they're shredded, and I want to look like a fitness model. That was my driving force, and it was on my bucket list. And I did not realize going into my second show how, I guess, jaded that I had become after doing so many shows, because the first show I was like, fuck yes. Like, I have abs. I've never seen my abs before. I celebrated everything, right? I was like, took lots of selfies and, ab shots. And I was, wanting to wear very skimpy clothing. And then as I progressed into my journey, it became more and more challenging for me to celebrate the process, right? The changes in my body and the wins. And while I would, rightfully so, see new lines or see new shapes, it would be like a glimmer of celebration followed by, but don't get too comfortable because you're not ready. So my fear was, and maybe you relate to this, I would love to know if you relate to this as well, is that I was scared to celebrate the wins. I was scared to be like, damn, all right, this week I did my 6 training sessions, my hour of cardio, and I did all my meals and this and that. I was always looking at what I didn't do perfect and essentially beating myself up and thinking constantly, I'm going to be on stage next to someone who has nailed these things maybe 100%, right? Because I didn't have a huge community of bodybuilders where I could draw from, and nobody was really honest about that stuff, right? Like if you had a snackcident or a binge moment back in my time when I was competing, you didn't really talk about that stuff. That was not something that was like, let's work through that, right? My coach would be like, well, stop that. Okay, that's not very helpful. But I'd get up, I'd get on the scale, and I'm sure a lot of you can relate to this. If it went up, I would be an awful person all day long. I would be awful to everyone, right? Like everybody would be at the wrath of the scale reflections. And it would be this constant looking in the mirror and pinching and, squeezing the fat underneath my glutes and constantly thinking like, I'm not going to win. I'm not good enough. And really talking myself off the ledge of quitting quite frequently. Yeah. In fact, every prep, there was a lot of conversations with myself about what the fuck are you actually doing? It was probably the loudest when I was in the prep leading up to Masters Nationals when I got my pro cards. It was the loudest then, right? It was imposter syndrome. It was never good enough. And I hate to say like I needed a little bit of that to really keep me on my toes. And I probably didn't. There was probably a million other tools I could have used, but I didn't know any better. And for me, that gave me an edge. And that kept me from making dumb decisions when it came to my food or when I wanted to consider skipping a workout or cardio or something like that. Nope, you're not good enough. You got to keep going. You're going to be on stage. You don't want to make a fool of yourself, right? So a lot. That's like really heavy, but it's true. And I've spent a lot of my life in a perpetual state of not good enough. So fast forward a couple years later, after competing, there is this saying in the bodybuilding world where once you see yourself that lean being on stage, everything else feels fat. Okay. And I hate using that word and it sounds ugly and I don't even like those words coming out of my mouth, but there's truth to that. Once you've seen yourself get that lean, you are constantly comparing your current state to your last show look. The other thing that gets forgotten a lot when you do this, and I really want to make this point, so if you have competed, you can at least digest this a little bit, is when you're that lean and you are in the phase of getting lean and getting shredded and in contest prep, if you aren't celebrating your little wins and successes along the way, a lot of times you're beating yourself up and you're kind of miserable about the process and, you're grumpy. And especially as you get closer, like all these things, and you're not really appreciating like, damn, you're like jacked. And like you have your moments and strangers see you or you haven't seen somebody and they're like, oh my gosh, right? But you go right back to, nope, don't get comfortable because you are not ready. And so you don't really truly get to appreciate the fruits of your labor until you're on the flip side and you're in your normie body and people aren't celebrating you as much and they aren't noticing your accolades and achievements and your trophies and your swords and your crowns and all the things, right? And so when you're on the flip side and you're in normie life, you're like, fuck, what the fuck was wrong with me? Like, why didn't I celebrate that, right? Like, why wasn't I running around naked? Like, I had my moments. Like, it wasn't all gloom and doom, don't get me wrong, but it was a lot of unhappiness and unsettledness with where I was just mentally, honestly. So with that saying, just to go back just a little bit, is when you see yourself that lean or your best shape, right? And I see this with everyday clients, right? I really want to, weigh what I did in high school or look how I looked in college or on my wedding day, right? And you're comparing yourself to that previous version of yourself, which at that time, that previous version probably wasn't even happy at that point. We're always looking back in retrospect and being like, damn, I really should have appreciated that. And I really want that for you now where you can really sit and appreciate where you're at. So for me, I had never heard that saying, right? Like once you see yourself that lean, it's like nothing else is good enough. And I honestly wish I never heard that. And I don't hope that this doesn't plant a thing in your head where you're like, fuck, she's right. And then you start going down your own. Please, that is not the point here. But I got that in my head and I it was at the forefront of a lot of my thoughts when it came to just how I felt about my body. One key thing is that I never abandoned my health and fitness routine, but it still never felt good enough, right? It never felt like it's not as hardcore as competing. I'm not as strict. And it was just never good enough. And this is something that still comes up for me now, right? I haven't competed in 3 years. And still, it will rear its ugly head occasionally. When I have weeks in my business, we're in a season of massive growth with the podcast, thanks to you guys, and the studio and the online coaching. And we're in this season of massive growth. And so with that comes a lot of work, right? I'm working almost double. And so with that, like my gym time is kind of, taken a little bit of a backseat of a priority. When I get in, I'm like, it's kind of in a rush. And so for me, it peaks back up, right? It's just the nature of the beast. It'll come back and it'll rear its ugly head. Like, oh, bitch, you're not doing enough. You need to be grinding 6 days a week, training lower body 4 days a week and upper body 2 days a week and cardio and eating strictly. It tends to resurface from time to time. And I've gotten much better at stuffing it down and being like, that is a bitch of the past. Okay. That's for a purpose. And we're no longer doing that. So we don't do that anymore. Okay. So really long story longer. I was comparing myself against a body and a lifestyle that was not reality, right? Competition prep, aspiring to look like a competitor, aspiring to be as lean as a competitor without competing, not realistic. I don't recommend it. And it's a question I get often asked, right? Like, I just want to look like a competitor, but I don't actually want to compete. And to which I always say, you're likely never going to look like a competitor unless you are going to compete, because the sacrifices that you have to make, the no's that you have to continually say, right? It's a lot of no's and not very many yeses when it comes to social gatherings and food and, staying up late and partying and family gatherings and all these things. There's a lot of no's and sacrifices. And when you're not prepping and you're just like, I'm just trying to get, to look like a competitor, it's really easy to be like, you know what? I'm really not competing. I'm going to go ahead and go out with the girls and like, we're going to have mimosas and brunch. Right. So again, comparing yourself against something that's not reality, I just want to give you permission to like release that, right? Like, you didn't need my permission, but please don't anchor to wanting to look like a competitor. That is not realistic. It is a sport, and it is an extreme sport at that. Now, I knew going through competition prep and seeing my body at these levels and having those little pockets of moments where I'm like, wow, I would love to look like this all the time, right? Which it's, in my opinion, is not, in retrospect, again, it's not something, an aesthetic that I'm interested in keeping, right? Like, it's great. It served the purpose for stage, but it's terrifying to most people. I definitely intimidated a lot of people, intimidated a lot of men during my single, and I was single for most of my competing years, but it's not something that felt in line with like my true like essence. That's the word that just comes to mind. Like, my true essence of like femininity and softness and just all of that, with the extremeness that is bodybuilding and the shreddedness, not something I was interested in maintaining for the long haul. Again, glimmers of like, that would be great, but it's not realistic. So one day, and we're going to bring this full circle because this is a pivotal moment. So if you are multitasking, washing dishes and listening to your kids running around in the background, come back to me, okay? Because I'm going to try not to get emotional. But one day I was out by the pool with my oldest granddaughter, Everly. And if you follow me on Instagram, I love me my grandbabies. I just love them, precious little girls. And she said some very key words to me that like rocked me to my core. This was probably, I believe this was last summer. So she was 4 because she's about to be 5. We were out by the pool. I was out there with the girls. They were eating chocolate popsicles and I'm in my bikini. And I, I'm pleased with my physique at this point. I've done a lot of internal work and worked past some demons. And she grabbed my face with her precious little baby hands. And she looked at me and she just squeezed my cheeks. And she said, "Grandma, you're so beautiful." Oh, my heart just melted. And it was at that moment that I realized I was living in a mental prison that I created for myself, right? Like, yes, at that point last year, I had done a lot of work and I was in a much better place with my my physique and how I felt about my body and accepting that like I don't need to work out like this crazy hardcore competitor. And I was enjoying this like precious moment with my granddaughter, and it just kind of came full circle and it slapped me so hard in the face. And I just realized I don't want that for anybody, and I didn't want it for myself, and I certainly would never want that for my granddaughters. And I decided that something needed to change, and I needed to really make sure that I did not start to kind of pull back some of those vicious cycle behaviors, right? So my attitude needed to change. My process around my health and fitness needed to change in my journey, and being more, I needed to be more gentle with myself, which is not something that goes like hand in hand when you think of bodybuilding, right? Gentleness does not generally, does not belong. It's not usually an adjective that belongs with bodybuilding, right? It's like hardcore and extreme. And so being gentle is to myself is a very foreign concept. So at that time I'm sure you guys have heard me talk about it on the podcast often. I had purchased a full focus journal, and they have a full focus planner, which is what I use to like map my day out and things. The full focus journal was a light bulb moment. Bing. It was taking me into journaling on another realm that wasn't something I gravitated towards. Now, when I journal, usually it's like, well, it's usually brain dumping all the problems and like untangling the yarn that is tangled up in my brain. And I can usually solve my own problems along with some tools that I know from just years of therapy and all the things, and reading lots of self-development and self-help books. But there are prompts in this full focus journal. And one key question in that journal that I feel is instrumental to this topic is, what in your current thinking is or isn't helping you? And that was something that I had to, it felt like a little bit of a gut punch, because I had to really like excavate that stuff and like writing it down on paper. Just as like, it's almost like, ew, like I think those things, that's kind of gross, like to myself. And it helped me reflect like week by week what went well, and celebrating also small wins, because there was also a prompt in there that was like reflecting back, like what are 3 to 5 wins from your week? And that was bizarre, right? Because that wasn't something I did. It was always like looking towards what I didn't do. What have I not done yet? What do I still need to accomplish? What did not get checked off the to-do list? And always feeling like that to-do list with, whether that be business, life, body, any of it, it was never ending. And it's going to be never ending. FYI, friends, I realized that this is what they, the proverbial they that were like, who are these they people? This is what they mean when they say, enjoy the journey, is you have to take a moment to reflect. And for those of you that are internally kicking and screaming because you're like, I don't want to journal, I hate journaling, what do? I just look at a blank page. Take these just 2 questions, right? Which is, what is in your current thinking that is or isn't helping you? And 2, what are 3 to 5 things that happened in your previous week that you can celebrate that are small wins? Okay. Now, most of the times through the week, I wouldn't pause to acknowledge these things or notice them. And it would just be constant thoughts of what I didn't do or wasn't good enough. And when I'd sit down to journal, they'd come flooding through. And this was a really big mindset shift. And this is what I'm excited to just tell you. And obviously through my story, and you kind of seeing the heaviness of what goes on between the ears of the boss bitch, right? It's totally a vulnerable moment for me, but very, very honest, and getting choked up. But when I would take the time to like sit down and brain dump like these small wins and like what isn't serving me, it was this little tiny glimmer of like celebration for myself, right? It was just like a tiny, like I'm getting the chills again. It was a tiny little sliver of like, okay, you did these 10 things. That's fucking amazing, right? And yeah, maybe we didn't accomplish these 2 or 3 other things, but these like 10 amazing things that were accomplished lead up to like big things, and they're foundational habits that are a part of my lifestyle. And it brings energy. And it's a motivation for yourself. It's self-motivating. And I can't tell you over the course of, I don't know, however many years I've been doing this now, since 2007, really, how many times I have received the question, which is like, what do I do for motivation? Or I lack motivation, or I start off really strong and then I lose motivation. And this, I'm going to tell you, might seem like, I was hoping you were going to tell me, like, watch some YouTube video or do some, meditation or do this. And while those things may help, reflecting on the things that you've accomplished are huge, right? Like, think about, like, for those of you that have children and positive reinforcements, and maybe if you're a teacher or maybe you're a therapist and things like that, where you want to celebrate the positives and really acknowledge positive behaviors to reinforce more of those positive behaviors. And this is essentially what this sneaky little journaling technique is doing. And it felt very weird. It felt very self-indulgent, and it was incredibly awkward because I'm not used to being my own little cheerleader, right? That's why I have Coach Glitter. She's positive Pollyanna, and she's, that ray of sunshine. But we have to be our own motivation sometimes, right? Because sometimes, like, I've moved, and where's positive Pollyanna? She's not here. Sometimes she's here, but she's not here right now. And so this is something that I'm practicing more frequently. It has been great for helping reduce stress, like a great stress reliever, where I'm like not always anxious and stressed out about, okay, the to-do list is, mounting high and I'm not making enough progress and I'm still not good enough and all the things. And it's now become a little bit of an obsession where I'm like, okay, I'm feeling overwhelmed. And a lot of times when I'm feeling overwhelmed, I really need to sit down and I need to brain dump and I need to think about, okay, what's going well and what's not serving me, what thoughts are not serving me, and what things have happened in the last week that I can celebrate, right? And this is something that often, the business coaching group that I'm in, Michael Keeler, Business for Unicorns, this is something they reinforce every time we get on a coaching call. What wins do you have this week? And I'm like, Michael, I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about my problems, right? But it creates some anabolic energy, right? Some positive energy and not feeling so gloom and doom. Again, like I mentioned, this past 2 years has been a journey back into loving myself, back into my body, doing the work and shifting my focus away from competing and more into settling into a normal life and a healthy mindset and a healthy relationship with food and a healthy relationship with exercise. And it has been, again, it's been a journey. And I want to bring an awareness to this, what this actual, I guess, like phenomenon is called, when we focus on what we haven't accomplished or what's not good enough versus what we've accomplished or, like celebrating our wins. And it's a concept called the gap and the gain. And this is actually a concept created by Dan Sullivan. Well, some of you may know of who Dan Sullivan is, but he's a well-known entrepreneur, business coach, author. And the gap mentality is when we fixate on what we haven't achieved, right? Or what's going wrong. And it creates a sense of dissatisfaction. And when I read this, I don't know, several weeks ago, and I'm like, light bulb, right? And I had in my content, bank of things that I was going to be recording was motivation. I'm like, okay, I need to create a podcast around this concept because I lived in the gap for way too long. And I want to get y'all out of the gap. All right. And the gain is where we encourage celebrating your progress and leveraging your past achievements as a foundation for future success, right? Like seeing the motivation in that, like, okay, I've done this thing, I can do hard things and I can continue to do hard things, and acknowledging that and being proud about that and not feeling awkward or weird, right? When we can admire the journey for what it was and what it is and celebrate those wins, you can learn a lot from that, right? So acknowledging your small victories. We're going to go through a checklist here, okay? Acknowledging your small victories. Super important to notice and feel good about the little successes that you've had along the way. And I'm going to share some of mine with you here in just a second. It's also super important to acknowledge it because you have to think of it like this. Imagine that you're climbing this large mountain, right? You're going up a mountain and you might not reach the top right away, but if you turn around and you notice without falling down the hill that you can celebrate like, shit, I'm like almost there, right? And you celebrate each step and you're just like, one more step, one more step. It makes the journey more enjoyable. It makes it easier. Like, damn, I already did all that and I'm going to knock this out the park. Now, I'm going to give you some examples of what acknowledgement looks like for me and what it could possibly look like for you. So, what changes did you make last week that will serve your long-term goal? This is one question to ask yourself when you sit down and you're doing this, because I know y'all are going to do your homework, right? What changes? And another thing to consider is, where did you make improvements from last week? So maybe something last week was like kind of nagging at you. You're like, yeah, I did all these things great, but like this one thing is probably like the biggest dial mover. And I'm like not doing the greatest of that. Where have you made improvements in that area? Right? There's always some glimmer of something to find in the previous week. Now, some of my own examples. As of recently, I have been partaking in the Goddess Body Project with our clients. They're, smack dab in the middle at the time of this recording, or the time of this podcast dropping. And I was getting like on average 7,000 steps per day. And like most of those days were like 3,000 and 4,000 steps because I was sitting behind a computer. We were creating the program and building out the membership site. And so I'm like living behind my laptop for 14 hours a day. So that 7,000 steps was probably like accumulated because on the weekends I was like hightailing it to try to like get some more movement in, right? So I was getting like 7,000 steps. Well, now I'm getting 11,000. That's a huge win for me. 11,000 steps average per week is fantastic. So 11,000 steps. The other thing that I'm celebrating that felt awkward at first because high achiever, working out 6 days a week and grinding it out and everything is hard and da-da-da-da-da. That's my old self. I can't compare my current self to the old self because we have different goals. And honestly, I don't want to live that life anymore. So for me, an accomplishment is I've been training 4 days a week since starting the Goddess Body Project. I'm getting in the gym, knocking it out. They're not 100% workouts all the time. Sometimes they're in a rush, but the fact is that I'm getting to the gym and it's happening because I went for like 4 weeks without stepping foot in the gym, which is a long time for me. And then the third thing, which is something that feels very awkward for me to admit, if I'm being honest, is that I've been resting more. And I'm admittedly have gotten wrapped up in the whole hustle culture. And I think moving and being an empty nester and honestly, like not really having to worry about much about myself and like my boyfriend occasionally, but he usually takes care of me most of the time, is I'm just grinding it out. Like I'm getting up at 5 and sometimes not going to bed till 1, sometimes 2 on some days. Right. And so I have been prioritizing my rest and my sleep because it has been affecting my health. That's a topic for another conversation. But 3 nights a week, I have been committing to getting 7 to 8 hours, which used to be religion for me. I mean, y'all know, like you've been listening to the podcast, you know that I'm like always harping on you guys to get more sleep. And I've just been in a season of stress and that has not been working out so well. So these are some things to celebrate, right? Now, notice, and this is what I want you to take home, is that none of these acknowledgments are scale related because that is fleeting, right? Like I'm not going to sit here and go, oh yeah, I consistently weighed 155 pounds last week. That's a win. While yes, it can be considered a win if I'm trying to maintain or, drop my weight or whatever. But the reality of it is that is a very quickly fluctuating number that can be affected by so many things. So I want you to acknowledge things that are not directly related to the scale or your measurements. I want it to be actionable things and things that you implemented that are going to improve your overall well-being, your health, your energy. And yes, the side effect may be some scale change and some inches lost. But these are habits that you want to reinforce as positive to keep your momentum, to keep your motivation, to keep that energy, and to honestly, to build some confidence, okay? Because that's why this is so cool, is because boosting your motivation and your confidence is a byproduct of all of this work. So small wins will equal big results over time. Just keep reminding yourself of that. It's going to make you feel good. It's going to make you feel real good inside. And you become your own positive Pollyanna. Yes, you do. You become your own internal cheerleader. And, you know, I don't know about you, but it feels real good to be having my own little boss bitch bestie all up inside my brain. That's like, girl, you got this. Okay. So it just makes you, it makes you want to do more. You're like, okay, I knocked it out last week. I can do this again, right? As a bare minimum. And then you just celebrate it and find other little small wins that end up popping up. And I do feel like a huge piece of this is if you have a planner that I'm an entrepreneur, so I have to map out like every hour of my day so I can like put in my meetings and, notes and things like that. And so this becomes like a scratch pad for those of you on YouTube, I'll show you, but this becomes like a scratch pad for my life, right? Where I'm like brain dumping all the things, sometimes like minute by minute. And it's wonderful because when I'm sitting down to look at my previous week, I'm like, oh, I don't think anything great like happened, right? Like I didn't do anything that extraordinary. And then I look back and I'm like, yeah, I took a lot of notes. This is an area where like I write lots of notes and keep all kinds of, little like stickies and things like that. And that helps me remember, right? And go, oh, on this call, I realized XYZ, and this is like a huge win for me, right? This is like momentum towards some of my other goals, right? I have like financial goals and things like that. So writing shit down and having a journal and a planner is extremely helpful for this. So this is going to build that intrinsic motivation, which is key in sustainable habit change and having a fit lifestyle. So when you get here, you are winning. Okay. When you get to this spot, you are winning. And again, just to reiterate, this process creates confidence because you know you can do hard things. You know you've done some shit. You can replicate that because clearly you've done it. And it's just one more drop of confidence in your confidence water bottle. Okay. So drink that shit up, bitch. Be thirsty. Now, I know we're a little lengthy because I had so much story time for you today, but with shifting your focus, building in that positive reinforcement, it starts to create that positive mindset, which is honestly a superpower. And it's something that, again, I'm working on. I'm still working on. I didn't grow up in a family that was like super positive, and it was a lot of gloom and doom, right? So it's definitely a lot of reprogramming. And I want you to think of it when you start to shift your mindset is putting on some like magic glasses, right? Like some clear glasses, some magic glasses for your mind. And when you put those glasses on, which is AKA in just a theory or concept, which is like your positive mindset, right? Your positive mindset glasses, everything looks brighter and better. So see the good in your eating healthy and your movement, your exercise, feel awesome about it. And think about this concept. This is something that I was thinking about as I was writing out my show notes was what if the scale never existed? Weird, right? What if the scale never existed? Would you still do these things? The answer for me, hell fucking yes. Okay. Not even just a hell yes, hell fucking yes. Because I know the mental health benefits first and foremost for me, the energy, the ability to keep up with my grandkids. I want to live a long time. I am able to do, great work in the world and hopefully touch a lot of lives, all because of my health and fitness and eating well. If I did not treat my body like a fancy sports car, then I would be operating like a car that you find at the pick and pull or the junkyard. So I would still be doing these things if the scale never existed, if we were never plagued by like, I need to weigh so much, right? I would still be doing these things. And if you're saying, nope, I would not be working out, I would not be eating healthy, then I want you to look at the positive effects that these habits that you are trying to build, right, in your health and fitness routine. I want you to look at the positive effects that it's giving you that are not scale related. And that, my friends, is what's going to keep you going. It's going to keep you in the game for the long haul. You're going to maintain lower levels of body fat. You're going to have less stress. You're going to be healthier. Your skin's going to look better. You're going to have more mobility. You're going to age gracefully. Like all of these great, amazing things that exercise and eating well provides you. Anchor to that shit, my friends. Okay. So I have gone on enough here, but I hope that today you have seen a little bit of where you can insert some reflections and glean your own motivation, your own confidence, and anchoring to new reasons that you have a healthy lifestyle that aren't just scale related. So let's just take it to recap real quick. Practical tips for this to work. You got to set realistic goals or you're going to frustrate yourself every time you sit down to do this exercise. So set achievable goals that are realistic and break them down so that way they feel like small chunks and you don't feel overwhelmed. Number 2, the journaling progress is key. So keep that journal, document your successes, challenges, emotions through your journey. Now, one thing that I love to use is the Full Focus Journal and the Full Focus Planner. And of course, anytime I love something, I beg, borrow, and steal to find a link for you guys. So there is a link in the show notes somewhere or the description. So check that out. That should give you a discount as well. But those two, pivotal, right? Because you don't have to think about the shit for yourself. It's already like prompted for you and you just have to fill in the blanks and this gets you going. 3, celebrate those milestones. You gotta celebrate, whether that's fitting into an old pair of jeans, constantly completing a workout routine, for my instance was my steps, your sleep, whatever. You got to celebrate that stuff. And then the last thing is you need to surround yourself with positivity. So you got to be in a community, in a friend group, hopefully a partner that is a positive influence for you. And this is so hard. This is why I drastically miss my community at the studio and I miss personal training. We cultivate that there at the studio, and it is a hub for women to be around other women who are on the same mission, right? They just want to feel better. They want to move better. They want to be stronger. They want to be fit. They want to be healthy, sexy, confident, whatever they want to be. This is an environment where positivity breeds positivity, right? My trainers are all trained on being positive. So this is what you got to find. You got to find your people and engage with them and engage with uplifting content also, right? So not getting sucked into content that's going to make you feel worse about yourself. Okay. I love you all. I want you to take action. So please, your next action steps are to set a calendar reminder, an alarm, something, a sticky note, whatever it is, to reflect. Now, my personal favorite time is to do this on a Sunday because I wrap up my week. I can look back, my week starts Monday and ends Sunday. So I look back and say like, okay, what went well? And I sort of do this process every single Sunday. It takes me about an hour. And I know you might be thinking, I don't have an hour. It's an hour a week that if you dedicate this to yourself and your mindset will pay off immensely for your future. So I say, even if you can only do 10 minutes, you got to start small. Just bite off a little chunk and just start simple. Okay. And then you're going to become obsessed. And now I love it because I do it for about an hour. I map out my week, the next week based off of my wins and what worked and what didn't work. I celebrate and then I get excited for Monday. Quite honestly, like Sunday, I'm like, oh, I'm excited. I'm excited for Monday. I love Mondays. So get a journal. Like I mentioned, the Full Focus Journal is great, or just grab a notepad, grab a section of your phone in the notes. Maybe you start there, keep it simple and brain dump those 3 to 5 things that are small or big wins from the previous week. And when you're feeling like a sad bitch, you need to remind yourself that you're a bad bitch, like a badass bitch, and reread those entries. This has been so great to like give myself a little injection of like positivity and a positive mood, because a lot of my journal entries, I have like dozens of journals, you guys, diaries, journals, whatever you want to call them. And most of them are filled with my problems. And this is how I would figure out my problems. And not a lot was done on like manifesting and, really thinking positive until I realized this is a thing. And it is certainly helping and instrumental in my mindset and my mood. So you will be super proud of yourself if you keep doing this. And there's no better feeling than when you can genuinely be proud of yourself. And that's really hard for some people. And listen, I'm still a work in progress, but it has become much easier to sit back and say, I fucking did that shit. And you know what? I can do hard things. And I might not be doing that anymore, getting on stage and getting trophies and doing all those things. But I'm doing a whole host of other amazing things that make me feel really good about myself. And I want you to also celebrate those things as well. So I hope this resonated with you today. If it did, I would really love if you just came over to my Instagram, like pull over, like don't cause a scene or an accident or anything, but like pull over and like DM me and let me know. And I want you to send me what your 3 to 5 small wins were from the week before. Bitch, I don't care if it's Wednesday. What happened last week that you can tell me about, and let me celebrate that with you, my boss bitch besties, okay? I would forever be grateful, forever be your humble servant continually through almost 3 years of podcasting. You guys were amazing. If you could leave me a 5-star review over on Spotify, over on Apple, even on the YouTubes, my YouTube friends over here, leave a comment, leave, a review. This just helps other boss bitches or boss bitches in the making that don't know they need the boss bitch, helps them find us. So let's continue to grow our tribe together. And till next time, my friends. Boss bitch.